Thanks for staying on. It's still Breakfast Live on GTV. I am Thelma Taki. Thank you for making time to join us. It's just been a week since President John Dramani Mahama was sworn into office, and already he has taken some steps, some described as bold, signaling his approach to governance for the next 4 years. From key appointments to the reorganization of ministries and directives aimed at accountability and transparency, his actions are generating both praise and scrutiny. The decision to reduce the number of ministries from 30 to 23, launch investigations into election-related killings, and the halt of the sale of state lands reflect a president determined to set a new tone for leadership. But how impactful are these actions, and do they align with the pressing needs of Ghanaians? Today, we'll assess the long-term effects of these actions, including the potential economic, social, and governance outcomes. We'll also explore whether President Mahama's decisions mark a shift towards a decisive leadership or raise questions about feasibility and implementation. To help us delve into this matter, Mr. Franklin Cudjoe, President of Imani Ghana, has joined us on our Zoom platform. Mr. Cudjoe, thank you for making time. Welcome to GTV Breakfast.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Can you hear me?
A very happy New Year to you as well. We can hear you very loud and clear. Thank you for making the time. I'll pick your initial thoughts on what you think the president has been, or your assessment of his performance so far. I know some would say this is a bit premature and that it's only 7 days into the administration, but I'm sure you have some perceptions already about where you think he's going. What do you think his direction is?
Well, thank you very much. I think generally, I can say, and I think I speak for many, that has been quite interesting and probably a bit more measured. I think the last administration was taking us through a very rough patch and at a certain speed that we couldn't just keep up with. And so to the extent that there's been some little, slow movement, more or less, careful, thoughtful ideas or decisions being made. At least, I think for me, I can say that it's been 1 week of calm. It's been 1 week of some measured approach to governance. Don't forget, this is not the first time John is in power. And so somehow it's a bit relieving to see some of the decisions that have been made. So generally, I can say that it's been quite comforting to see. It's been quite, quite respectful of the way things have gone the past 1 week. Of course, there are a few, I call them minuses, people who have been going around rounding up and actually abusing civil servants and all of that. I mean, those things definitely are a minus. But in terms of the governance approach, the decisions so far taken, I think by and large, John has kept his word.
Right. Let's begin to focus a bit more on some of the specific details. Even before his swearing in, then President-elect encouraged his members in Parliament to keep Speaker Bagbin on as Speaker of the 9th Parliament. Now, this move drew some mixed reactions from sections of the public. Some thought it should have been a subtle in-house directive instead of the more public statement that he issued, talking about the implications perhaps for the politics in the House, knowing what we've been through in the 8th Parliament. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought there was, I think in the euphoria, I mean, John could be excused. The fact of the matter is that he should have said he was recommending and not necessarily shoving down the decision down the throats of the majority. I think that was what democracy activists and watchers were quite worried about. I mean, but I think I understood it in the balance, the Kenyan balance, that look, this gentleman has done a lot of good work already for the party and for the country, if you stretched it. And so maybe he should have used the word recommend rather than saying that he was basically nominating the person for that position. He could be excused for that particular decision. I don't think he meant shoving down the decision down the throats of the MPs anyway. And in any case, if they had put it to a vote and they didn't like it, they would have rejected him. in the first place.
But do you think they could have, though? Because President Mahama has been president before. He knows the ropes. He's not new at this game. So his wedding and, the lettering of the statement would have been properly thought through. So does that make you think that it was a deliberate choice of words in that statement to nominate Speaker Bagbin?
Oh, the choice of words obviously were not the right ones to be used. But as I said, I think it would have come to pass anyway. And I think he, being a Democrat and hadn't been in power before, he probably should have used words that were quite, that would say we're recommending and not necessarily demanding that the MPs vote for him, vote for Speaker Bagbin. And I think we can excuse him, as I said, and a moment of euphoria. Some of these things are allowed.
Do you expect that things will be markedly different when it comes to the relationship between the legislature, so Parliament, and the executive branch of government, from comparing the two administrations, the one just gone by and the one that is in now?
Well, I mean, knowing Speaker Bagbin and knowing that he hold his own and protect Parliament and make sure that Parliament is respected, I would think that if the executive also extends an olive branch and is respectful, I suspect that they would have a good, jolly ride. But if it is the case that the executive will think that because they have a super majority, they can decide and do anything they want, I'm not too sure Speaker Bagbin will yield to those kinds of, if you like, immutable or some sort of direct types of, not necessarily threat, but also essentially showing that the executive is more powerful than but the legislature. I don't think Speaker Bagbin will allow any of that. But safe to say that, well, he's definitely from their party. And so somehow you expect that there will be some cordiality and some respect. I think the bottom line for me, the bottom line for me for this relationship would be based on mutual respect. If anyone decides that they are not going to respect the other, then clearly speaking, there'll be rough patches. And I don't think that's what we all want. In any case, conflicts are useful for democracy, for relationships, I suspect. And I think that they can smoothen their differences without necessarily deliberating and getting into the realms that we saw with the previous administration. And it was not the best at all. So they are well advised anyway.
Many had similar sentiments when the 8th Parliament was sworn into session, and the expectation that with the close numbers in the House, cooperation and collaboration would have been more effective. But many agree that we did not see much of that in the 8th Parliament. Do you foresee this Parliament having any challenges, and what kind of challenges would you anticipate? There is almost a landslide shift in Parliament, with the majority having more than enough numbers to push anything through. Do you foresee that being a challenge? Because the minority might also want to exert some opposition and use their voice very loudly.
Well, as truth be told, I think the last Parliament obviously was going to be the way it went, because it was just too close. It was a hung Parliament, and every decision counted. You remember the number of times MPs had to be flown from wherever they were in order to take part in voting, right? So it was like and so we saw the sometimes disrespect basically becoming the order of the day between the Parliament and the executive. Well, there's a risk with this new administration that if they think that they have a super majority, and so may not necessarily want to yield in terms of building consensus, then they'll be in for some level of trouble, because I suspect that the minority, even though they are in a very, it should be. Okay.
I think we're having some issues with the connection. Yes, Mr. Cudjoe, we can hear you. We have a bit of a challenge with the connection there, but we can reorganize and continue the conversation. We're talking about the happenings in Parliament and how you think the challenges can be surmounted.
Yes, so I was saying that the majority risk being turned disrespectful, should I say, self-serving, if they think that they will not like to consult when they bring decisions on the executive brings up whatever decisions it wants to Parliament. I think they will well serve themselves if they pay fidelity to the text of Parliament, which is to discuss every program, every policy that the executive wants should I take into Parliament. I think they would have cut their teeth by making sure that the right things are said and the right things are done with the decisions that are brought into Parliament. So I don't think it will serve them well if they decide to just rubber stamp. That's the other risk as well, that people will think that when they have a super majority, then they are likely to rubber stamp everything. I don't know. Well, we see that everything that the executive brings, you guys just rubber stamp and move away. I don't think that will help at all. So I foresee some relationships would be smoothening between the executive and Parliament, the majority side especially. And I suspect the minority side would also hold it home.
Mr. Cudjoe, some of
marketing especially, this really needs to work. One year.
Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in. I thought that you had finished making the point about Parliament.
Sorry?
Because I wanted to raise the issue of the president's other appointments with you. There was not much surprise greeting the news that Mr. Julius Deborah had been named Chief of Staff under this administration. But what seems to always keep coming back is that oral team, the Operation Recover All Loot team that has been set up by the president to receive information and basically, put them together and hand them over to an investigative body. Yesterday, at the vetting of the nominee for the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, that matter came up and he defended the basis, the legality of the institution of Team Oral led by the Honorable Samuel Cudjoe. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you say to those who think that this is not in the right direction?
Basically tell us that John was quite probably happy with his first tenure, and that he thought that he was unfairly chucked out of the system. But he's brought them back, and hopefully, probably they've also learned their lessons. Probably better to continue with the same team, and probably an upgraded team, more disciplined, more experienced, having reflected over their tenure. And so somehow he didn't want to rock the boat that much. So Julius Deborah being Chief of Staff, as I'll say, it's an excellent decision. It's an excellent pick. The nominee ministers they were also, at least the three since so were deputy ministers at the time when John was in power, the last time he was in power. And now he's basically elevated them, which also signals that he believes in them and that he believes that they've actually honed their skills while in Parliament and been reflective over the last administration. And so for me, I really did not see anything particularly wrong with the appointments. But I can say that, yes, yesterday listening to the appointments committee and the vetting, yes, I was a bit alarmed about oral at some point. But, when the nominee Attorney General is speaking, that look, it is just like any entity giving information to the Attorney General for the Attorney General to probably look at it.
What was the basis of your alarm,
I was a bit
Mr. Cudjoe?
comforted. Well, I was alarmed because, you see, somehow anything that obviously is set up without the necessary rear guards in terms of the constitutional structures within which they operate, and especially the euphoria of a new administration, and knowing the wrongs that have been committed in the last administration, ordinarily people will be worried that, look, the people may probably take the law into their own hands, and the mere fact of the oral assistance, people may think that they could do things in the name of oral. And I think we saw a few of those. Some of the, should I call it, officers, state officers and all of that. I think they took some is probably inspiration from not just the change, but also inspiration that there's going to be an oral that is going to basically recover our loot. So anybody you suspect must have looted or stolen, then you are the person is at your beck and call, and probably the person will not be at peace. But again, a part of me also felt that the oral was useful even if for the mere fact that it existed, because the fact that people would feel that, look, if you know that you have unlawfully appropriated state resources to yourself, then somehow you need to answer questions. And I think the fear factor was for me enough. But of course, we are in a civilized world, and we expected that the oral would do just as what the Dominion Attorney General suggested it is likely to be. And I think that that should be the way to go. Otherwise, I think oral seems to be doing so well so far, I think. And for me, the fact of the matter is that once people lawfully come forward and even negotiate that, look, I'm ready to give up things I've stolen, inappropriately appropriated, well, why not? I think for me, it's another arm of trying to exert justice even before we went into finding out those who may have committed wrongs against the state.
Let's focus a bit on the president's new ministries as contained in the executive instruments, the Civil Service Ministers Instruments 2025, and some of the changes that we noticed, some of which were raised by the Appointments Committee yesterday during the vetting of the three nominees. One of them being the absence of a Ministry of National Security, and the explanation that the nominee for Attorney General had to give with regards to whether he would advise the president to put that back in the mix. Is that a significant omission that should be brought back in your estimation?
Well, we have the Ministry of Interior, don't we?
Yes, it is named in the list.
Say that again, please.
The Ministry of Interior is named in this new EI.
Yes, and there are various security agencies as well, I suspect, all working under the Ministry of Interior. I mean, the idea of a national security ministry or a national security setup could just not exist physically. I suspect that these may be embedded in the current, should I call it, architecture that John Mahama has proposed. I think John Mahama will be naive. I don't think people think he's so naive not to understand that there must be some remit for national security. Maybe he just doesn't want it like the way we've had it in the past. But it doesn't mean that there will not be anyone looking out for security or security issues of the country. So I'm not too sure I'm not too sure it's a fair criticism, especially when the security architecture probably is being woven around a certain line that we probably are yet to understand. But for me, as long as the Minister of Interior is there and the service commanders for the various services, security services are in place, well, it seems to me that will be enough, really. I mean, the president will have to be briefed by certain people about security every day, as I suspect it happens already. And so maybe not in name, but probably it exists in the shadows.
Let's focus on energy for a bit. The nominee, Mr. John Abdullahi Jinapor, yesterday also sat with the Appointments Committee, and he was asked certain questions related to the ministry that he's going to be heading if approved. Did you get the sense that the green transition side of the new portfolio, which has been added onto energy, was effectively tackled at the meeting? We'll talk about the power crisis in a bit, but some believe that if we are able to do this transition to green energy sources, it would ease the pressure on hydro and thermal, which is currently the areas that we are having challenges. Do you feel that it was effectively tackled at the vetting yesterday?
Well, I think the vetting is an opportunity to explain new ideas and, if you like, new pathways. I don't think we got enough from the nominee, probably because of the issues around time. But I think he spoke fairly about why we needed this transition. And I think that for me, beyond all the explanations, what critically is missing is our preparedness in terms of finance. I mean, I've always asked myself, how many fundable projects, green or renewable projects, do we have in this country that are fundable? The money is there, and I know that. I mean, we've worked at the money for a number of these institutions that are ready to provide green funds. We've worked with green entrepreneurs, young and medium and probably large ones. Unfortunately, they've not honed their skills, or they are not that innovative enough to be able to bring ideas or proposals forward that are worth investing that much. So there's a lacuna that ought to be filled on the demand side of things. But I think the supply side is really ready in terms of the amount of money ready for green transition ideas or programs. And there's just tons of money. And I've seen some of it, but we are not ready when it comes to packaging them at the national level and even at the institutional, private institutional and private individual level. I don't think we've done enough at all. And so the minister would have a lot of work to do if he really wants to preach green transition. It's not just for the country itself, but even individuals have to, believe in it. And that's why I believe in certain, small project, mini project that basically take people off the grid. And there are a few of them that exist already. And also entrepreneurs are working, some Chinese entrepreneurs who build solar, even in the office. Sometimes we take ourselves off the national grid as well. But you see, it has to be encompassing. There must be some, as I said, the national determine the contributions of a country when it comes to the issues of climate change, indeed transition, green transition. Unfortunately, it requires so much at the national level that I don't think we are that ready yet. We need to really work together and make sure that we get the right thing. Otherwise, why not? I'll be happy to drive in an electric car. Why not? As long as the roads are good and as long as I can have charging points, why not? So I don't think it came out that well, and something Imani is taking up strongly. We've been looking at this matter for the last 3 years. We've been working in institutions across the world, and I think that we would do ourselves a whole lot if we focus on the small things. The things that are innovative that will take up this green transition funding. But there's a lot of funding, a good system. I mean, one of my fellows was in Paris not long ago. After doing a presentation, he got attracted by a few investors who said, well, look, we looked at Ghana. This things you're telling us is wonderful. In Ghana and especially across the continent, Africa, we just don't get fundable projects. We don't have fundable projects to fund. And so that's the real issue there. I mean, look, when we said we'll go to view, some demonstrated, some institutions demonstrated, was it the Ministry of Science? Was it forgotten? Ministry of Science and Innovation or Technology? And then during Prince Boateng, that erected the solar panel on its offices. How many offices did? Nobody did. I don't think government offices are even using solar as we speak. But that's the way it should start. Charity begins at home. If all government institutions were showing signs of transitioning, and all ministers were showing signs of transitioning, well, the others will follow. But as I said, it is in the interest of everybody to transit one way or the other. And as far as that goes, we at Imani are at least beginning charity at home. So there's a lot more to be done on that score, Madam.
Indeed. EVs, the plan to make them, roll them out more into the public have been there for a while. The previous administration, the Nana Addo Bawumia administration, had a plan to have charging points at some petrol filling stations. And there's no word yet on whether that idea may be adopted by the current administration, because we are yet to see a full resumption of office of a Minister for Energy, and in this case, with the additional responsibility of a green transition. Is that something that you would expect, that an idea by a previous administration, for the sake of, some would say, continuity, is adopted and perhaps implemented to a large extent by the new administration?
One of the things plaguing this country, and probably most of Africa, is that we are attracted to, things that are a bit shiny, things that are on the go, but we did not actually prepare the grounds to receive them. I'm not saying electronic vehicles are not good, but look at the speed with which they were suggested and then pumped into the system. I mean, during elections, we had to bring in what's called electronic buses and all of that. That's not how to roll out a policy. They don't roll out policy in bits and pieces. It all has to hang together in a very seamless, sensible, practical way. Unfortunately, as I said, yes, we can bring electric vehicles to this country, But look at our routes. Look at the time. Look at the place. Where would they stop? I mean, do we have all those? Should I call it prepared approaches that will stop at some point? They'll pick passengers. Have we built the infrastructure to enable something like that? How dusty these roads are? Will electric vehicles be comfortable working on these dusty roads? I think we need to move incrementally. I agree, but in a very sensible fashion. Much as we should think that electronic vehicles are useful, and rolling them out would be useful. I mean, probably individuals are best making that decision. I know that my good friend, my senior vice president Kofi, has an electronic vehicle, but he uses it rarely on streets that are paved. So you can't. You can't
So there
just
are
wake up and
there are
start
some
doing things
infrastructural issues that need to be resolved there. Perhaps my last question to you on energy before we go into other sectors of the economy and based on the president's first week in office would be about the power crisis. Now, President Mahama campaigned heavily on a promise to bring about a 24-hour economy into the country, and he's almost immediately adopting a power crisis as soon as he enters office, with the threat of the return of the dreaded doom. So one of the key reasons why many say he lost the election the last time. What do you think the principal focus should be now for a president who has made this promise, and the reality that it hinges on the availability and stable supply of power?
Without a doubt. I mean, look, the last 8 years or so have been more or less, people say stable, but it's been more or less like, it's been decisions made in the power sector have never really been sensible. The energy space as well. If you look at the oil side of things, not a single barrel of oil, more or less, has been additional oil has been found by this administration. So there are challenges there. You'd have thought that even if we were going to use liquid fuels, the power of the gensets or your power systems, at least ensure that there's some steady supply from global areas, from the global community. But even there, you may be paying so much for it. So what about the resources that are already within the country? Why didn't you move with decisions like ENI and many decisions that came your way? I think the last administration prioritized, what I call, it's not even Machiavellian way of doing things, completely disrespectful of contracts and all of that. So we never added those significant resources, which probably could have served as well, because you see, those additional resources come with gas. And that's what are we doing with the current gas itself as we speak. We have not maximized the gas or our gas fortunes, which should primarily be the source to giving us cheaper power. I was surprised that we are still paying homage and we pay so much for liquid fuels as we speak. And therein lies the corruption. Therein lies the opportunity to procure and make some 10-20% cuts. And even then, it's not even open because the procurement process is opaque. So I think that John has walked into another minefield, and I think he needs to carefully untangle or disentangle the entire power sector. Otherwise, you still have the tag of this doom software, and I don't think it's pretty at all. But the challenge is that it's the brinkmanship, this highbrow brinkmanship of not respecting what ought to be done so that at least the resource steady flow. Some politicians thrive on, creating unnecessary need, and that's what the last administration did. I don't think the past situation should have been so bad or should be so bad that we owe close to 2.5 billion, probably $3 billion that's left in debt. Why would we want to do something like that? When we set up systems like the cash waterfall mechanism, that would ensure that there's a seamless operation where the various utilities will have their due, and then it will be said, why should we be having meters, almost 2-point-something meters to us, almost 3 million meters, and half of them not working properly? Why? Why should we have different meters not speaking to each other? Sometimes when you don't have, should I call it electricity, and you want to go across, maybe across town to go, but you can't use your card in certain areas. I've never understood this type of arrangement. I don't think we are an organized lot when it comes to this at all.
In all this, the administration has
those are the
signaled.
things that matter. Small things.
in all this, the administration has signaled at a possible privatization of ECG. Do you think that that could balance the scales out a little bit and help with the current situation?
Sometimes politicians like to talk about privatization and make it sound as though it's something so difficult to do. I mean, you and I know very well that in some other sectors of the economy, privatization was done without any and we are all beneficiaries of it. I mean, we are using data, right? I mean, data by MTN or whichever the data source you have. And at least even though prices have remained a bit high, so the element of competition has also actually helped. Why should it be different in the power sector? It's only politicians who create problems about privatization and what I call institute what I call chronic capitalist arrangement. That's not privatization. That was what happened in the PDS issue. Unfortunately, it was not done properly, and then somehow we all took a fall for it. I think it is simple to do privatization. Decide which part of the distribution, the value chain you want to encourage privatization. I was even want privatization all throughout, from the distribution, from the power generation, the distribution side of things. Because clearly speaking, I don't think the state has served us well at all. I mean, if you're a private entity and you're leaving debt for your shareholders of almost 2.5 billion, you'd be out of business. Wouldn't you be? And you think that if the private sector are taking a consensus private sector, by the way, not chronic capitalist arrangements that benefit politicians and all of that. That's not the type of arrangement, if this administration wants to privatize, it would encourage them to do at all. They should make sure that they do not do what others have done in the past. Chronic capitalist arrangement, never, that is not privatization. That is not the way to do it at all. And I think there are simpler ways of doing this, and the politicians will be better off. But the allure of procurement, the allure of procurement and making money, essentially what makes politicians not necessarily frightened, but actually happy at the opportunity and celebrate that at every point in time. So we'll have to all watch carefully, and I know you will do so yourself, and the media folks as well. So it's not a difficult thing to do at all.
Right.
But
we will monitor. We will monitor. We will monitor the happenings within the power sector, and I'm sure that we will have the opportunity to engage you again on that particular topic. But let's go back to the cabinet restructuring for a little bit and the president's announcement of the ministries that he will be working with, reducing them effectively from 30 ministries to 23. And many think that the decision aligns with what he promised Ghanaians, a lean government and a reduced burden on the coffers of the state. Some of the interesting things that we saw, apart from the green transition being added onto energy, were the decoupling, as has been the case in years past, of the Ministry of Sports from the Ministry of Youth. Now we have a Youth Development and Empowerment Ministry, separate from a Ministry of Sports and Recreation. Is this well timed, and what impact do you anticipate that this will have, having separate ministries for sports and the youth development?
Well, overall, I think the reduction in ministries is just symbolic. Well, some people say we should be grateful for small messes. I mean, if you think that we came from 120 something to probably 60, we should be grateful. And somehow, yes, we are not going to save that much, but a little bit helps. If you look at the number of ministers that will be shaved off, if you look at their emoluments and their allowances and their perks, all of them come up to some critical billions, almost forgotten the figure. We calculated it at the money, I remember. But it was a little bit significant that could do something. At least it could pay for school fees of tertiary students if for probably a year or two. If Mahama's promise of paying first year fees of them come to pass. But the real issue has to do with the various people who work at the civil servants who work at these ministries, who would have to be distributed amongst the existing ministries. And so there's still a significant amount of money to be charged. I would have wished that the presidency would have calculated and would have told us, and the finance minister at least should have told us yesterday how much that he thinks would have been saved. Because I think leaving those things to when he takes power was actually not the best head so far. I mean, and he said a few things that I wasn't particularly happy about. The 24-hour economy explanation, it sounded as though it was not part of the modeling process for this 24-hour decision. You know, he didn't know the figures. He didn't know how much would be put aside. He didn't even have an understanding of how the 10 billion will be raised, infrastructure development to be raised. And it's a bit worrying. And anyway, we can quibble about that a bit later. But on the whole, I think that the ministries, yes, having been reduced is fine. The question about recreation and sports and what do we, for me, I don't even, frankly, I don't see the difference at all. But of course, if you added them, I think, then you're actually making it emphatic that ministry be responsible.
So the issue for some is that for the longest time, when the Ministry of Sports was the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the youth side was largely ignored. So talking about youth empowerment, creating youth-tailored jobs, opportunities for young people to take advantage of was lacking. The focus was largely on sports. And even in sports, it was the Black Stars and very rarely other sporting disciplines, even within football. So for a man who campaigned on, being a listening ear to young people, creating opportunities for young people, there are those who think that perhaps that is why he's separated these two, so that more focus will be given to youth issues, youth development issues, youth empowerment issues, and then another person can worry about the sports bit. And we haven't even touched on recreation yet, or what it means for this administration. But do you understand how that analogy could be sensible to some people?
Even when we've had names that probably resemble what ought to be sensible and what ought to be done, we haven't really paid fidelity to those, really. I mean, recall when was it Jake who was Minister for the Modernization of the City? What did it receive? The city was not really embodied like. So I'm not one taken to these kinds of names or nomenclature at all. In any case, under the last administration, there were a phalanx of a lot of youth-related interventions that they had. Didn't we have NAFCO that failed? We have any EIP that was supposed to have, but somehow was truncated, skewed towards other things? Didn't we have dedicated youth-related interventions? We had them all as well. So the fact that we had the Ministry of Youth and Sports did not deter the last administration from creating other, wings of youth ostensibly to attend to the youth. So for me, now that John seems to have listened, and probably listened, as you said, and then created this nomenclature so that we all seem to be happy because now there's a youth-focused institution. I'd rather be interested in the deliverables, making sure that the youth are attended to, the youth gets an opportunity to get into business, are more innovative, the innovation is acknowledged, and the skills that they need in order to be innovative are actually well attended to. It starts from the education. So I'll not be focused so much on the youth side of things, rather than focusing on the thing that would encourage that the youth eventually, when they come out, they wouldn't even need a ministry to take care of them. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'd rather be interested in the building blocks of ensuring that the youth become innovative, attractive talents, talents that will be attracted across the world, rather than have all these nomenclature and then I call them show parties, really.
Let's talk about accountability for a bit. Let's talk about accountability before we wrap up. The president has made a number of directives. First of all, asking MMDCEs to vacate their positions and hand over to the chief directors of the various MMDCEs. He's directed the Lands Commission to halt the sale or lease of state lands because of concerns that have been raised about what some say are the looting of state assets. The president has also ordered investigations into election-related killings. What do these things tell us about his plans to restore public trust in institutions and in the governance structure?
Thank you. The signaling effect is enormous. On the issue of, for instance, investigation into the killings, it brings some sort of closure. It sends a sense of equity, a sense of fairness, a sense of respect and honor to the names of those who were murdered, unfortunately. And I think those things are symbolic, but they carry a long. I mean, the impressions on the minds are very, not just the families, but everybody else who watched these defenseless people being murdered would say that, well, that's justice there. It brings, at least, it's the beginning of the closure for most of these families. But I don't have my heart for such a decision. On the issues about state lands and the varies and the race to basically capture state assets, it's become quite obscene to think that people will buy prime property because the person was a politician or was a they are hangers on of politicians, and buy prime property that should cost about 100,000 a piece, pay like 16,000 Ghana cedis for it or 160 Ghana cedis for it. It's an insult, really. And I think that if he can reset, even going back to his own administration when he was in power, then maybe people may have appropriated lands in that regard. The signaling effect is important. And to the extent that it could be done fairly, so that people will now feel that, look, yes, we have a president who said that he was tired of the state capture and loot, and then he wanted to reset properly in order to upgrade, would have served the purpose really. So for me, I don't have my heart to him. It can be done and done properly so that we reserve this land for.
And it brings me to my next point, that how does the administration use this as an effective tool of accountability rather than a tool of, some would say, vindictiveness and witch hunting, which we've heard being raised as concerns for some of these exercises?
Well, it will depend on how it is done. I mean, if people have been found out to have appropriated these properties wrongly, they need to be given the opportunity to represent themselves and explain themselves. That is the only way people can say that it's not a witch hunt, rather a tool for accountability. And as I said, it shouldn't just stop there. It should permeate almost all aspects of the politician's life, the decisions they make for us in office. That's the signaling effect and the impact it will have, really.
In the coming days, we expect a number of things. Perhaps the Appointments Committee will communicate approval of the first three of the president's nominees for the three ministries that have been designated. Some believe that an education minister designate should have also been named because of the critical matter of feeding in senior high schools that we are going through. Looking ahead, what would you consider to be the areas the government needs to focus on more urgently in the coming days?
I think this question is a very important one, but you see, it flies in the face of what exactly the president has said he would like to do. Within the first 14 days, he would appoint all his ministers. So, sorry, we name all his ministers. And I think he's still left with a few days. We probably would have to do that before the weekends, and so that we know exactly what we are dealing with. As to whether there are more urgent or more important ministries or areas that should be focused, I yield. So the issue of education is very important. But I suspect that there may be some caretakers who are at least looking at things of that in that regard. Otherwise, we never have a country that should be continuing. Because in any case, after the ministers have been vetted, there has to be a report, and probably that may also take some time. We cannot say that it's an intelligent state that relies on wait for a minister to be appointed before they do the needful when it comes to issues of education. And I can see that the CHAS, or whatever they call themselves, have already started suggesting to the president that people should bring their food. You know, it's like freedom they never had. But that tells you that there must be some persons, some people who are caring or taking care of these ministries who can report to the president directly. So there's no lack of ministers necessarily who have to be vetted, and sometimes would have taken the shine off or would have taken attention of crucial areas.
Mr. Cudjoe, thank you so much for your time with us this morning. I'm sure that Imani has a lot up its sleeve. We'll wait for some of the reports that you are putting together so that we can scrutinize them together and bring the details, perhaps proffer some solutions to our national problems. Thank you for your time with us on GTV Breakfast. Mr. Franklin Cudjoe is the president of Imani Ghana, a policy think tank. He's been sharing his thoughts and opinions on the president's first few days, about 7 or so days in office, and he's expressed some thoughts on happenings in Parliament. He's also shared his views on the vetting process as well as the energy sector. He's also talked to us about accountability and ensuring that state assets are protected. I'm sure that you've also joined us on our social media platforms, GTV Ghana. Thank you for the comments that you left there. We didn't have time to read many of them, but next time we probably will. Mr. Cudjoe, thank you for making time once again.